All right, now here's a bit of a trip down memory lane. Those that know me know that my background and my brother and my family used to be involved in model aircraft. We started with, it would have been 1973, 4. My parents bought me a Cox model PT-19, or I think it was a Spitfire at first, then a PT-19. And then we started building balsa control line models through the 70s, I guess. It would have been balsa control line models through the 70s. My old man used to build, and I built a few. And then this plane here was my first foray into RC. This would have been 1981. I reckon I would have been about 11, 12 years old. And this is a QB15H built by kit by Pilot. As I said, it's the first RC model I ever built. And it was originally powered. I had in it a grossly underpowered 1.5 cc, or is it 0.15 cubic inch? I think it's cc, 1.5 cc OS15, and then that was later replaced with a bigger engine. And this engine in here now is an OS20, and I believe it flew quite well on that. I haven't seen this plane fly in years. I learnt to fly on it. It was quite handy. It's only 2-axis, so elevator and rudder only, and throttle. No ailerons. It's got the original nose wheel I can see with the twin forks there, but that undercarriage there at the back is not original. I actually sold this plane to a friend who gave it back to me after he was cleaning out his house. And I believe he fixed the fuselage or replaced the fuselage because it was rotted. But the wings are original, and so is the blue elevator, control surfaces, elevator and rudder. This is all the original solar film. Again, this is 1981. I mean, just imagine that. And I was when I built it, I forgot to put the doubler in there, and I was told that the wings had collapsed. Well, I don't know, 40 years on, it's still together, and it's had some big dives and loops and all sorts of recoveries. So there you go. That was my first trainer, QB15H. And then we run down here. Now, this is my brother's plane. He pretty much learnt to fly on this. Same sort of thing, 2-axis and throttle. That's not the original engine. I think it used to have an FP40. That's now some sort of Chinese high-performance 40 or relatively high-performance engine. What's that? FS something or FSP. So this is a Hustler 40, 2-axis. And what was really nice about this plane was the undercarriage had a rubber band on it. It's just got string there now to hold it together. There used to be a rubber band, and what used to happen is if you came in too hard to land, which was often when you were training, it'd actually just fold the undercarriage back on itself so you didn't rip it out of the fuselage. It was really handy. This is an original. This plane, I reckon, would have been built a few years after this one, maybe 2 years after, a year after or two. And this was predominantly flown at Parkes in Peninsula. This one was first flown at Murdoch Airport on a Dick Smith radio, and I said underpowered engine. But when I first saw it fly, I was just blown away. I was so happy. It flew so well. I remember it took off, climbed to 100 or so feet, or maybe 200 feet, and then it dead sticked about 30 seconds later and did the most beautiful gliding landing. And I was hooked from that moment. I was into it. Anyway, that was my brother's. You can see it's still in pretty good condition. It's all pretty much there. And that was a good plane. Then we bought this plane off a neighbour who had a whole bunch of airplanes. I've still got the one with the orange wings that my brother might recall. I've still got that one floating around. It's I haven't got it here, but I have got it. And this is a middle stick, I think, or an ugly stick, one of those. We bought this off a neighbour. It had no engine in it, and we originally flew this engine with a Wankel engine, believe it or not, a Graupner OS, the original Mark 1 Wankel engine. And it was a great little aeroplane. Flew fantastic, really true. This was built, we're going to say, by Tony Cincotta at the Hobby Hangar in Caulfield. Tony's since passed away, but he was a really good craftsman, quite a good engineer. Knew how to make a buck too, or hustle a dollar. Rest in peace, Tony. But he built this. You can just tell it was built at his shop out of a kit. You can tell because it's still got the numbers on the wings. And again, this is the original fabric. This plane would have had to have been built in the 70s because I built that in the early 80s, and this one was hanging in my friend's dad's hobby room for years before that. Anyway, I used to fly this plane on a Wankel, and then we'll later put an OS engine on it or something here. Yeah, I think it's the original OS engine we used to run. It's been in a million planes. I can remember the exhaust used to be in a HOTS I used to run. They got crashed a million times. But these are still the original planes. And then probably in the 83, 84, I built this. Ben Meeking, a friend of mine, he built what are they called? Great Plains Super Sports Dubai. And I used to fly his plane and throw it around, and they were great. So I got the plans off him, and I scratch built this from his plans. And I flew this plane a lot. This has got a Sato 45 in it, and it goes really good. It's got the original propeller and spinner too. Never broken the prop. Made the spats and all the bits and pieces. Pretty crude, but it actually flew quite well. Had a lot of fun with that plane. And then this one here was probably one of the last smaller models of plane. This was probably the best flying as far as aerobatics are concerned. This is a, what are they called? Extra 230. I can't remember the kit manufacturer. Anyway, it was pretty much an ARF. A friend of mine, Joel Petter, had one of these, and he had a 32 two-stroke in it. And I flew his one. We did a deal or some swap, and I ended up with his plane. Had a mid-air, and that was an awesome aeroplane. They had a mid-air collision with someone at Parkes, but I loved the plane so much, I purchased a brand new one from the States, not realising back in those days, this is well before the internet, not realising, I think I bought it through Tower Hobbies, back through a magazine, ordered it on the telephone, paid for it, and then when I worked out what the exchange rate was when I got billed for it, it was about $400. This is back in 1985, 86, somewhere around there. Oh man, that was a lot of money back then. I was bleeding, and I've still got the plane today. All the plastic's starting to rot a bit here, but the rest of the plane's okay. This is all broken because it's just perished. But this is okay. This is made of a different plastic. Seems to be okay. But this is junk. This would have to be remade. But the rest of it's all okay. The wings are wood and foam. So is the fuselage. Those are an awesome plane. It used to do flat spins and launch-evacs, and it's just a great little plane to fly. Again, it's got the same engine in the orange biplane. It's got the should be sticking out the side there. Sato 45. It went like a dream. Yeah, there's a really hot little aeroplane. So there's your planes. And also I got a selection of engines out. When my brother and I moved out of Dad's home, or we cleaned up, I think Dad was renovating or building a new house, so we had to get all that junk out. We were literally tearing engines out of old control line models because we thought we'd keep the engines. And here's a selection of some of these engines. This is definitely a control line model. You can see it's got no carburetor, it's just a Venturi. And this is an OS 15. Very popular. These are common. They had no exhaust. You used to run them flat out. Can you imagine back in the day screaming around some park, driving the neighbours nuts. But these were very popular back in the day. We had lots of these engines. That was one we just tore out. This is another one we used to fly in control line models a lot. We used to have a few of these, although I can only find one. And maybe there's some few floating around, but I could only find this one. We used to have quite a few diesels. These were probably the most reliable. Davies Charles, I think they were called. Davies Charles, DC. Again, 15, DC 15. Those tiny little engine bolts, they're not even 2 mil. But yeah, diesel engine, so contra piston inside there. This is all seized up, of course, but you could free it up. But these used to run quite well. They had a propensity to break crankshafts. You'd be flying along on your control lines, and all of a sudden the prop would just fly out with half the crankshaft. It used to split right across where the hole would, the port would go through the crankshaft there. Being a two-stroke, there's a hole cross-drilled through the crank, and it used to break right across there, and then the whole crank would just flake. It's just a bushed engine. But those were a lot of fun. These used to start really easily, but they were weak. I mean, you can imagine how skinny that little crankshaft's going to be in there. Again, no muffler, just screaming away. This is an engine I remember well. This I think might have even been in the... that prop's familiar. That yellow prop is a prop we used to run. Definitely control line. 100% control line. I'm going to say that was probably in an orange flying wing. We had big orange flying wing. This engine here is another little engine. It's got the carby on it, so I reckon that was in the... I remember that broken exhaust too. That was definitely in one of our small RC models. This engine was probably one of my most infamous engines. I used to scream. Remember that spinner? I used to scream around with this little engine in a HOTS. I used to go nuts. I used to love flying really low. I used to see how low I could fly down in millimetres, literally, till I'd hit the ground sometimes. But this was an Enya CX40. And the carburetor looks really modest, but this engine is high performance. It used to really scream. It used to really go well. You wouldn't know it by looking at that carby how basic it is, but it just used to absolutely scream on the RPM. It was fantastic. And here's a definitely controlling engine. It's got Dad's, my old man's epoxy. He used to love the ribbon epoxy. They made a needle valve out of it, or handle, knob. Definitely a control line engine, little Venturi there. This is a Taipan. I believe these are Australian made. Taipan. 2.5, possibly CC. Don't know. Oh, 15 at CC, I'm confused. I don't know if it's 0.15 cubic inch or 1.5 CC or 2.5 CC. I think they're the same. I think they're the same size, these engines. So this is a 15. Someone might be able to tell me what the 15 stands for. I wasn't sure if it was cubic inches or 0.15 cubic inches or 1.5 cc. This is 2.5, so I don't think this is double that, is it? Anyway, this was a great little engine. This engine first came with this yellow stick I was telling you about earlier. And it had a this Wankel engine in it. Yeah, it did. It had this engine in it. And it used to run really well. Quite unique, obviously, being a Wankel engine. See here, it's got, if we focus in on that, I should be able to give it a tap. Come on, focus. Can't quite pick up the badge there. Yeah, it's frustrating. Should pick up that E. There it is. Graupner OS 1 30. Goes at 0.3 cubic inch, 4.9 cc's. It's a true Wankel. And it used to run really well. When it was brand new, it would idle and it would rev, and it'd fly that little stick quite nicely. Probably not as well as a 40. I'd say to be in the realm of a piston engine, like a 30 size engine. That sort of performance. But I remember running it in more recent times, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And in the end, you could only really run it flat out. It just wouldn't idle. And I'm going to suspect the apex seals have worn out, or it's got air leaks somewhere through it. It needs to be investigated. I really would be quite keen to pull this apart one day. It's a fascinating little engine. Yeah, so anyway, yeah, it basically only runs it flat out now. So I'm going to say it's got some sort of seal problem. Could be looked at later, some other lifetime. And this is a little engine I picked up off a bloke in a car. He came into my workshop with a boot full of, he knew I was into model airplanes, and he brought this in. This is a fascinating little engine. Look at it. It's a little Enya. Little Enya engine. What size is it? 049 or something? What's it say under there? Yeah, it is. 049. Little tiny carburetor. What a beauty. Never run. I've never run this engine. I got given it. And there's another brand new engine there as well. It's a early Thunder Tiger. And again, brand new, never run. There's a little needle there. Yeah, that's just a collection of a few engines and model aeroplanes from my past. I doubt that I'll ever use them again, but they're nice to look back on. Anyway, take it easy. Bye-bye.